connection to the disappearance. Another suspect in the disappearance of Karen Mitchell is millionaire and suspected serial killer Robert Durst. Robert got his fortune, which was estimated to be over $100 million, through an inheritance from his father, a New York real estate mogul. Robert's brushes with the law started in early 1982. His estranged wife, Kathy Durst, vanished after leaving a dinner party in Manhattan on January 31, 1982. She had left the dinner party because Robert had called her and told her that she needed to come see him. The police interviewed Robert, and he said that Kathy came out to a cottage that he owned that was just outside of New York City, but she left on a train back to Manhattan later that same night. After a few weeks, the investigation into Kathy's disappearance went cold. 18 years later, in 2000, the police started to reinvestigate Kathy's disappearance. One person they were planning to interview was 55-year-old Susan Berman. Berman was an author and journalist, and she was a longtime friend of Robert Durst. On Christmas Eve 2000, days before she was supposed to be interviewed, Berman was found dead in her home in Canyon County, California. She had been shot once in the head. The police had their suspicions, but they couldn't prove anything, and no arrests were made in Berman's murder. 9 months later, on September 30th, 2001, body parts were found on the shoreline of Galveston Bay in Texas. The body was identified as 71-year-old Morris Black. When the police were investigating Black's murder, they found a trail of blood leading from his apartment into the apartment across the hall. The landlord told the police that Dorothy Sinner, who was an elderly mute woman, had been living in the apartment across the hall from Black for about a year. It turned out that Dorothy Sinner was really Robert Durst dressed in drag. Robert was arrested for Black's murder. In police custody, Robert said that Black's death was an accident. Robert said he came home one day and he found Black in his apartment and he was holding his gun. Robert claimed that they got into a struggle over the gun and it went off. The bullet entered Black's head and he died. Robert said that he didn't think that anyone would believe him when he said he was acting in self-defense, so he dismembered Black's body and tossed the pieces into the bay. In the fall of 2003, Robert went to trial for the murder of Black, and his lawyer argued that it was self-defense. The jury ended up acquitting Robert of murder. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of bail jumping and to tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and he served about 2.5 years. In 2010, a movie about Robert Durst was released called All Good Things. Ryan Gosling starred as Robert Durst in the film. Robert saw the movie and he got in contact with the director, Andrew Jarecki, and he told him that he was impressed with the movie. He also agreed to be interviewed by Jarecki. Jarecki used the interviews as part of a documentary miniseries called The Jinx. The first of the 6 episodes aired in February 2015 on HBO. On March 14, 2015, the day before the last episode aired, Robert Durst was arrested and he was charged with the murder of Susan Berman. In the last clip of the final episode, Robert isn't on camera, but he is still wearing a microphone that is recording. He starts talking to himself, and he very clearly says, "What the hell did I do? Kill them all, of course." Robert Durst has yet to go to trial for Berman's murder. Robert Durst is also a suspect in some other cold cases. One case is the disappearance of 17-year-old Lynn Schultz, who went missing from Middlebury, Virginia on December 10, 1971. Lynn was last seen going into a health food store where she shopped regularly. Robert Durst was the owner of the health food store. As we mentioned before, he is also a suspect in the disappearance of 16-year-old Karen Mitchell. Robert Durst lived on and off in the area of California where Karen went missing from. Although Robert was a millionaire, he had a habit of eating at soup kitchens. Karen often volunteered at the soup kitchen in Eureka, and it's very possible that she met Robert there. Robert also bought shoes from the store where Karen's aunt worked. One of the last places that Karen was seen was at the shoe store. One investigator even found a credit card receipt that showed that Robert was in Eureka on the day that Karen went missing. Finally, Robert Durst strongly resembles the sketch of the man who was seen talking to Karen before she went missing. Robert Durst has never been charged in connection with the disappearances of Lynn Scholes or Karen Mitchell, but he is considered the leading suspect in both cases.